about you or they acknowledge something good that you've done, like that's special. And it's made even more special when it's genuine. It's not just like, a business ploy to boost morale and increase motivation.
Welcome to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive. Brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. I'm your host, Clayton O'Brien, and I'm the fire chief for the city of Oregon. All right, welcome to the Triple P Podcast. This is episode number 28, and we have Emmons, who is the Deputy Chief of Operations for Sarasota County, and that's actually the state of Florida. First met Ian a few years ago when he was actually a deputy chief for Washington Township. But Ian is an experienced leader and educator. He does have 18 years of experience in the public safety sector. Ian's focus is all about building relationships. And, just a little bit of time that I've known Ian, I can see why that's definitely a big attribute of Ian's himself. So he does this through outreach and the use of innovative and proactive measures to protect the communities that he serves. He continuously builds these competencies through mentorship, experience, and on-the-job training. And once and for all, definitely formal education is a huge part of Ian's career. So as he does have a master's degree and bachelor's, and I'll let you talk all about that, Ian, as maybe you can kind of fill in the gaps and give a little bit of introduction of where you started at with Washington, kind of how you progressed, because I remember talking to you before. You had started in Washington as a lieutenant, but now all the way up to a deputy chief. So welcome to the Triple P Podcast, and let's hear a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on. So started way back 2006, 2007 with Liberty Township in Butler County. So started there as a firefighter paramedic at 21 years old, and was super fortunate. That was right in the recession, when you'd have a couple hundred people that were applying for 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs. And I was extremely fortunate to land one with Liberty, which was definitely a prized catch in that area at that time and now as well. But spent about 8.5, 9 years there as a career firefighter paramedic, just a really flat organizational structure, which early on in my career was great. It taught me how to be a good firefighter, how to be a good paramedic, how to be a clinician. But there was a period of time, maybe year 5 or 6 prior to that, I was one of those people like, I'm happy being a firefighter paramedic. No way I ever want to promote to lieutenant. And then, year 5, year 6 hit, and I kind of got that itch. And just kind of, and I couldn't put a name to it at the time. But, looking back now, just a very flat organizational structure. We had a fire chief, we had an assistant chief, we had one captain who oversaw EMS, and then just a couple lieutenants for about 17 of us on duty per day. So there was just very little structure there to promote. So I was kind of left with the choice. Do I stay where I'm really, really happy, where there's a fantastic culture and I had great friends and I just love the fire department, or do I kind of branch out and make myself uncomfortable and pursue what I knew that I wanted to pursue, which was to promote? And that was kind of the start. And I credit my wife, Stacy, with a lot of that, because, I think the natural inclination for most of us is to stay comfortable, especially when we really, really like where we're at, and my wife has always been one to push me. So around 2015, Washington Township and Montgomery County, a larger fire department, about 5 stations, just over 100 career members now, opened up for a external process for a company officer, which I'd never heard of. Ultimately, I couldn't even fathom Liberty Township opening up a company officer position to the outside. So that was definitely something that caught my eye. And I didn't know much about Washington, but I did know that I wanted to promote, and I knew that it was not that far away from where I currently was geographically. So after talking to she was my fiance at the time, but after talking through it with Stacy, made that decision to go ahead and apply. And I can remember 2 of my best friends, I actually printed out the application for them as well, because it wasn't a competition, right? It was about the ability to kind of push ourselves. And ultimately, I was the one that applied. The other 2, again, they loved where we were at as well, and they just kind of made that decision that they wanted to stay, which it's panned out, in various ways for them as well. But ultimately, 30, 40 applicants. They promoted two, one internal, and they brought me in from the outside, which yet again I was extremely fortunate to have that opportunity. And that was kind of the start of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, because coming into an organization that was much older. We were doing 7 or 8 thousand calls when I first got there in 2015, and it just they embraced me, which was absolutely incredible, because it would not have been the same. It would not have been the same at Liberty Township had somebody come in from the outside, and I can say that very, confidently. So I kind of went in bracing for the worst, hoping for the best, and it was a really interesting dynamic because I had to come in as a officer, which ultimately we always teach our officers at whatever rank. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you do need to know a little bit about everything. You need to know how to utilize people, and ultimately I had to learn that because at Liberty Township there was no real opportunity for me to ride out of class. So I went from being a backstep firefighter paramedic for about 9 years, which I was extremely confident and good at that job, to now all of a sudden being in charge of an engine company. When I didn't really ride up, there was no process for that. So I went from backseat to right front seat, just literally overnight. And not only did I do that, I had to go into an area geographically that I didn't know, with a whole group of individuals that I didn't know, with a protocol that I didn't know, with a response, like everything. It was all brand new. So I had to figure out a way to give. I had to figure out a way to be vulnerable while still also holding on to my ability to lead and build confidence and credibility with those individuals. And that was kind of the making of where I knew that I needed to build relationships. And I'd always found that to be extremely enjoyable, getting to know people and just building relationships as a firefighter. But it took on a whole new life as a lieutenant from the outside of an organization that I'd never worked at. It was all about building those relationships because again, I had to build that credibility. And I fortunately had several fires very soon after getting there. So I was able to build that credibility through, real life action where people were seeing what I was capable of, which is certainly helpful. But again, I had to, we would be going to a call. I didn't know the roads. I didn't know the response area. So I had to give that over to those driver operators, and I had to give that over to some of those other individuals and rely on them to support me while I supported them. So that was kind of the start of really building those relationships. And fast forward about 2.5 years, a battalion chief process opened up. It was a fifth battalion chief. We only had four prior to that, so it was a new position. I was on a ladder company. I loved the crew that I had. Ultimately, had I known that I would have kept that crew for probably another decade, I don't know that I would have put in an application, but I knew the dynamic of Washington at the time is the crews changed often. So just kind of knowing and understanding that, decided to throw my name in the hat because I didn't want to pass up on an opportunity that was potentially not one that was going to come around again. Fortunate enough to get that promotion as well. So I promoted to battalion chief in late 2017, and spent about 2 years as a battalion chief overseeing a shift. Yet again, our fire chief retired in 2019. Deputy chief position opened up because the deputy chief was promoting to fire chief. And just through his mentorship, I decided to go ahead and throw my name in the hat for that. And instead of promoting just a deputy chief, they actually promoted two of us. So that was absolutely incredible because the other individual, Chief Nick Bergman, who's the chief now at Washington Township, he got promoted alongside me as deputy chief, and we were able to kind of grow in that position together. So really, from 2019, early 2019 until December of 2023, I spent as the operations chief for Washington Township. And the hallmark of that entire 9 year, 8 year period that I was at Washington Township was all about building relationships and helping culture change occur at a digestible rate, and making sure, and that's not without failure, and that's not without trials and tribulations, but really allowed me to hone that. Chief Kajawa, who was the fire chief at the time, decided that he was going to go ahead and retire in January, and I was kind of left in a weird predicament in the sense where I built myself to try to be the next fire chief for Washington, and it was going to be a toss up between Nick and I could have worked for him. He's a fantastic officer. So it really was a win-win for me. I either got promoted or Nick got promoted, but at the same time, another opportunity availed itself with Sarasota County. just through talking again about being uncomfortable and being comfortable with that with my wife, and just kind of looking at we have a very young family, and it was kind of like, am I going to retire in 8 years and have teenagers that I uproot, or are we going to move now and not get my full 25 but start something over. So I threw my name in the hat at Sarasota, and to be perfectly honest, I don't know. I didn't really have an expectation one way or the other. I knew it was a nationwide search. It was for an assistant chief shift commander for Sarasota's 25 stations. We're about 550 operational members, just about 600 altogether. So obviously a much larger organization. We do about 70,000 calls a year, so much busier. So again, I didn't really have any expectations. I just kind of threw my name in there because it was a really attractive job in a good area, a great fire department. And if I didn't get the opportunity, that was fine. And if I did, then great. So that was May, June-ish, and fast forward all the way to push comes to shove. I ended up not applying for Washington for the fire chief job because I ended up getting the job at Sarasota, and just kind of made that decision that I didn't want to throw my name in the hat and potentially have to make a decision and go back on my word. And I was really excited for the opportunity at Sarasota. So just kind of buckled down and made that announcement, which was really difficult because that's a whole group of individuals I really cared about, from top to bottom, in a community that I lived in that I cared about. But it was the right time, and Sarasota's been fantastic so far. So came in as an assistant chief shift commander, spent the last 6 months as a shift commander overseeing 25 stations on a daily basis. I was a shift commander, so I think about 190 that are assigned to the unit day and about 130 on duty a day. And then my current boss, or my former boss rather, made his retirement announcement. The deputy chief of operations role opened up, so I went ahead and threw my name in the hat for that. That was again a nationwide search. Unfortunately, I was able to secure that position as well, and I was promoted on June 3rd into that position. So I've been kind of shadowing and working side by side with my former boss, who's going to be retiring at the end of this month.
Wow, that's one heck of a career, Ian. I know that when I had reached out back, when we had met on LinkedIn, and when you talk about creating relationships, just the type of person you are, made me feel super comfortable as a young guy that was reaching out to you for some advice back then. And then to hear where you're at today was huge. And I didn't realize that it had taken place a little while ago until I seen the update on LinkedIn. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know you were actually there. But I knew obviously with Scott retiring and that there was going to be some changes, I actually fully expected you to be the next fire chief there in Washington. And because when you went there, in Washington had made a lot of transition during the time that you were there, right? Didn't it change essentially from a combination to all career, or because you guys are hiring a lot?
Yeah, when I was brought in 2015, I was actually, I think, the 28th career hire, and that included fire chief all the way down through career firefighters. And we had about 115 part-time members. And when I just left at the end of December of last year, so about 7 months ago, we were, I think, 90 career firefighter paramedics. We had maybe 3 part-time members that were still left, and then they announced 12 more career hires, and then we also had an entire community risk reduction division, training division, all of that. So we were about 115 members altogether, with only a couple of those being part-time at that time. So yeah, it was a huge growth, and one that was needed, honestly. The volunteer community there and the part-time community there did great work for a really long time. But when you're doing 8 or 9,000 calls a year, that's not that busy, but in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty busy. About 30 calls a day, 27 to 30 calls a day, and it really lent itself to that push to career. That way you had that crew continuity on a day-to-day basis, and you were able to build out some of those programs and whatnot. So I think that the evolution that it took, at the time, it felt like it was slow because everybody kind of knew that it was needed, but looking back, I can recognize it happened really, really quickly. And I credit the firefighters there and just everybody with that organization, that I'm still really close with a lot of them, and I credit them for being able to digest that change, because it was so so much change, and it was not without its growing pains. And they're still going through growing pains. They're still growing to this day. I anticipate they're probably going to be 110, 115 line firefighter paramedics here in the next couple years. So they're still going through that, but that entire organization has just really embraced the change. And again, not without its troubles, but everybody has really seen the big picture.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen without, like, to your point of relationships and what you're so good at. That doesn't happen without, creating good relationships within the house, so it bleeds to outside the house, and not only you being in a leadership position, but also all the leaders above you, to get the community support. And and I always call it about, like, the customer service. All those EMS calls are those little times that you have relationship building times with your customers, essentially, that become your biggest supporters when you're trying to make a big change. Because I that's what I seen when I had looked at Washington. I had seen that it was a rapid growth department, and it was making a lot of change. But I do think that you hit it perfectly by saying that it's all about the people inside the organization that have to embrace the change too, because as rapid as what you guys were changing and the amount of people that are coming on, there's also that huge training piece to it. And then if you're talking about a lot of outsiders, where it's multiplied by that many more that don't know the area, and and so on and so forth. So so what would you say works for you the best as far as creating relationships? Like, how is there any specific thing that you're like, okay, I think that this works, most of the time? Or what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it might sound generic, but it's true. I think just being genuine, just trying to find connections with people, whether that's, and that's been one of my big struggles coming down to Sarasota. Is at Washington, and as I talk to members and I'm getting to know people, at Washington, I knew everybody's name. Every single person's name. There wasn't a firehouse that I walked into that I didn't know their name. And I pretty much knew every single person's spouse's name or girlfriend or boyfriend's name. And I typically knew at least how many children they had, if not their kids' names. And I really prided myself on it, not just memorization, like rote memorization. It was about, like, getting to know the individuals and having that ability to have those conversations that were a little bit deeper. If I came in and popped down in a recliner and there was only one firefighter in there, I had the ability to sit there and have that connection with them. And that's one of the things that I've really, tried to focus on, because there's a lot going on down where I'm at now. We're a growing organization. We're adding members. We anticipate a lot of growth in terms of fire stations and adding members over the next coming years. So it's really important to me to get ahead of that, and when I have the time to get out to the firehouses and get to know people and just genuinely get to know them, because that's been one of my biggest struggles, or the things that's made it hard for me, is I don't like walking into the firehouse and not knowing people's names. I don't like not knowing if they like to go sailing, or if they like to go fishing, or if they've done martial arts in the past, or if their daughter rides horses. Like, those are the types of things that I've been able to really, like, build those relationships based on, like, just getting to know people and being grounded, like, as a human being. I'm a chief officer. I'm an officer on the organization, within the organization, but it's more than that. We're all there doing the same thing. Like you had said before, we're serving a customer, we're serving the community. And part of that is us building a really strong relationship and crew continuity within the organization. That way, when we go out, we have that foundation. So that's one of the things that I found probably the most success on, is listening with the intent to hear rather than listening with the intent to respond. And that's, I had to post it, and if Chief Kajal, if Scott listens to this at some point in time, he'll probably laugh. I had to post it on my computer at Washington, that my desk pointed out and my computer screens pointed at me. Nobody else could see them. And I had to post it that was on there in two separate places that said, "Stop talking, listen more." Ultimately, it was one of those things, like, I had to have those reminders, because it's really easy to want to say what I want to say and try to talk over people if I disagree. It's a much more important thing to be able to listen to people and actually understand where they're coming from, because maybe I can clarify something that they're having a trouble with, or maybe I can provide information that can help them get from point A to point B. So it's really important to me to listen with the intent to hear people. So again, that's something that I'm really focusing on where I'm at now. and the people have just yet again, I've hit the jackpot. The community is fantastic, and the people within this organization at Sarasota County have just been extremely welcoming. They're fantastic at what they do on a day in day out basis in terms of the calls that they go on and the level of expertise that they have when they're on the calls. And honestly, I'm just in awe. Like I'm in a really awesome position to be able to go out on fire scenes and other incidents and just kind of watch them work. And then I revel in the opportunity to go back to the firehouses and just get to know them and find out what their background is, because 6 times as many people as what I'm used to at Washington, 6 times as many stories, 6 times as many backgrounds, 6 times as many experiences, and I really enjoy getting to know people because of that.
Yeah, you made a good point with the genuine, like, listen to with the intent to hear them rather than to respond. And that was one thing that I had to work on myself, honestly, because I do think, like, a lot of us type A personalities, we want to be able to, say what we know, and we want to be able to, have that input. And early on when I was became chief in 2015, I didn't necessarily have the note there on the computer, but I constantly always tried to remind myself that, like, don't try to just listen to respond, or like you're trying to, like, tell them what you know before they're even done telling you what it was. And I really seriously had an issue with that. And I have been really trying over the years to constantly just remind myself that you don't always have to be the one saying something either. And as I read more things and as I try to, continue to expand on leadership, a lot more that you're hearing is that just because you're the chief or the one that's sitting at the table, that maybe you should be the one talking less. And unfortunately, we are that's hard because we are talkers. That's what it is. But being genuine, though, caring, for your people and for them to truly feel that you care for them. I think that, you knowing their name and knowing their family, knowing who their kids are and what they do, it puts you on a different spectrum. It's not just, I'm a boss to an employee type of thing. So,
we've all been there.
That's right.
We've all been there, right? We've all been that firefighter who's kind of been in awe whenever somebody who we look up to or somebody that holds a prominent role within an organization comes in and they know your name or they know something about you or they acknowledge something good that you've done. Like, that's special, and it's made even more special when it's genuine. It's not just like, a business ploy to boost morale and increase motivation. It's like when, as firefighters, we see through people that are, not genuine or disingenuous. Like having known that from the receiving end, I try to deliver that, it's praise in public and make sure people know that they're doing a great job. That way, when you have to have those tough conversations, crucial conversations, they know that you're coming from a genuine place.
Yeah, that's right. And I always found it too nice as, sitting at the kitchen table, eating lunch, having a meal, joking, giving each other, the little back and forth, if you will. It always just kind of breaks the ice, and, it's a good way of being able to build the relationships. You learn a lot about the individuals that are there. I mean, it's crazy the impact when you don't really realize it. Because I was kind of in the same shoes as you when, to challenge yourself to be uncomfortable. And that was recently when I had went from Napoleon to Oregon. And when that happened, I kind of, I was super happy in Napoleon, I knew that, yes, you could probably ride out the next 10 years there and it would be no issues, but really, is that going to challenge us in growth? And one of the things that I kind of, that impacted me a lot was one of the firefighters had came to our organization from another one. And that really just didn't happen that often. I mean, we were a size department that you weren't really that size of a department that could really steal from other departments. Yeah. And so I'd ask that firefighter why, like, hey, why did you leave there to come here? And it was easy. It was a quick answer. He's like, because you eat lunch at the kitchen table with us. And I'm like, well, I got to eat lunch too. I didn't think it was that really big of a deal, but now seeing that, cause see, I didn't really have that when I had, chiefs, that I had worked for. I didn't really have that. So I just felt like, just be genuine. We're all human. Just because you're a chief officer doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, and we're not human beings just like everybody else. We still don't want to forget where we came from being firefighters. So,
Well, and sometimes I think that's one of the most powerful things is for people to see us make mistakes and acknowledge and own that and be accountable to that. And that's important to me. When I make mistakes, I'm very accountable to that, whether it's to my boss
Yep.
or whether it's to a firefighter. If I make a mistake on an interpretation of the CBA, or if I make a mistake on application of a vacation day, something like that, whether it's at Washington or where I'm at now, like it's important for me to go back to them and say, hey, look, I evaluated that based on what you said. You were absolutely right. Here's what I did to rectify that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, and have that conversation, because it's important to me to have them know, like, I'm not above making mistakes. I make mistakes every day. Ask my
Hmm.
wife. I make mistakes every day. And it's one of those things that I want to make sure that I'm accountable for that, because I'm going to ask the same thing from them.
Yeah, that you're not going to sit there
When
and
they
give.
when they make a mistake.
You're not going to sit there and give them 10 excuses of why you made that decision and try to make
Yeah.
up for what it is. It's just, okay, I just own it. And what we call it in
Yeah.
our place is 100-0. Just be 100% accountable for your actions, zero excuses. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Hey, it is what it is, just own it and say, hey, I didn't know it and now I do. That's great. And I think
Yeah.
that goes a long way with them, because then they feel like, oh gosh, Clayton, he can't own anything, or he always has to
Yeah.
be right, or whatever else. And he'll argue till the end, or, if that kind of relationship happens, then they never feel like they can really trust, or that you're genuine, or whatever else. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think? Some of your other experiences. So you build good relationships on just being a genuine person, but I think you've also built a lot of good relationships in the fire service by being an instructor.
Yeah.
You teach the Fire Officer 2 class at Bowling Green, and actually a lot of our firefighters were in your class.
Yep.
We're looking to implement the lieutenant position, which will be new for us. That we have battalion chief and then firefighter, but we don't have this middleman manager company officer. As we're kind of going to a similar transition of what Washington did, maybe not as on the big of a spectrum, but we are going through that. So you've made a lot of good relationships there, and so you talk about, or you instruct, I should say, this company officer class, or Fire Officer 2. Can you talk a little bit about that? Some of the main points that you like to highlight within that class that you feel are super impactful for these students that are hitting the street, aspiring to be company officers?
Yeah, I think that's been extremely formative for me, having that opportunity to instruct, because it really makes you analyze what you're going to go talk about. So I do my best, and if you've spoken to any of the firefighters that were in the class, out of the 3 days, and I had to skip out the last day, but out of the 3 days, there's about 7 or 8 slides, PowerPoint slides for the entire 24 hours worth of instruction. I'm not a big PowerPoint person, because one, I want them to guide the class, right? Like, they're in there. I want them to learn what they want to learn about, what they need to learn about to be better company officers. But one of the things I try to impress upon people is, when you get to that role, and I'm painting with a broad brush, right? So, like, there's all sorts of people that promote, but typically when you get to the point where you've promoted, or you've identified yourself as wanting to promote, the fire service, law enforcement, military, public service in general, we do a fantastic job at developing the hard technical skills of our job, right? Throwing ladders, conducting size ups, doing 360s, identifying neutral planes with smoke, reading smoke, looking for impending signs of collapse, all of those things. We do a really good job at instructing in that. We do a really good job, depending on the busyness of the organization or their training budget, we do a good job at putting people in positions where they can gain experience. We've really, really honed that side of the training house as it relates to company officers. But what I try to impress upon people is that's the stuff that I spent 9 years doing, right? So, like, I was a really competent backstep firefighter and paramedic, because I spent a lot of time doing that over 9 years, both full time and then working part time my entire time that I was full time at Liberty at a couple different organizations. But one of the things that I didn't have, other than just what was innate, was the soft skills side, the ability to traverse some really complex personal situations that you don't get a lot of training for. And, it's one of those things, whether it's knowing where EAP information is whenever it's asked of you, and having that on immediate content recall, or knowing what to do if somebody calls you and says, hey, my significant other didn't come home last night, that's why I'm not at work, I need help. Or whether that's somebody saying, hey, I have a gambling problem, or somebody who just is having a difficult time showing up to work on time. Like, it doesn't matter. Insert personnel problem here. Those are the things that trip us up a lot of times, because one, they're uncomfortable, and two, they're gray. fire grounds. It's black and white. If you can do a 360, you do a 360, right? If you can have a RIT crew, you assign a RIT crew. Like those are very binary things. We know that we need to do certain things on a fire ground. It's much more gray when we start dealing with people. So I try to impress upon on the people that I instruct and the people within the organizations that I've worked at is that is an area that you have to be self-motivated to try and uncover and learn more and more and more about, because each of us have different strengths as it relates to interpersonal communications and how we traverse those things. So I think it's one of those things, like a Fire Officer 2 class, a Fire Officer 1 class are great starts. Those are really great things to kind of kick that off and introduce you to the things you don't know what you don't know. So you go to those Fire Officer 1 and 2 classes, and that kind of exposes you to maybe what you don't know. But it's a long road. Right. So it's not just you go to a Fire Officer 2 class and man, you're good to go. No worries. You know exactly how to handle HR problems. It takes more than that. So I try to impress upon people, like, continue to sharpen your proverbial technical skills. Continue to be a really good firefighter. Continue to be a really good fire officer in terms of tactics and strategies. But you do need to put a significant amount of time into handling personnel issues and being a coach and being a mentor and being a sponsor, right? So like a lot of the things that I've said so far have had a little bit of a negative connotation, but there's a beautiful side to being a company officer, and that's the opportunity to coach people and help people get better and help people progress in their trade and help people, really envelop the crew as their own and really build upon that. So those are the things that we're blessed to do as company officers, and I try to expose people to that notion is that you've already done a lot of the firefighting stuff, you've already done a lot of the EMT or paramedic stuff, depending on your organization. It's all that other stuff that you really have to put a lot of time and effort into developing, because it is innate for some people. We've all met those people that are just naturally charismatic and gifted and that. But for the other 95%, there's a lot of work that goes into being able to acknowledge, HR is scary, and you need to know what your resources are. And I tell people, and I'm sure if you ask any of the ones that were in the class, I frequently say, be a resource of resources. Right. So you don't have to know everything, but you need to know all the people and all the locations of the things that people are going to need, whether that's, BWC paperwork, EAP paperwork, EPCRs, no matter what it is, you need to be a resource of resources. And that's what I try to impress upon them is it's a two different sides to the same coin. There's the hard skills and there's soft skills, and you need to develop both of those in tandem, not just one.
Yeah, they're still in the same organization. They may know the same people, but just as you and I have taken our places into going from being comfortable to being uncomfortable, it's just the same as promotion, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because like these individuals are they're now stepping into this super uncomfortable spot, and I think you've made some really good points. Is like the personnel issues, and I still say today for myself that HR is scary. Like you don't know, we're not really kind of built for that all the time with all the laws, regulations, and all the things that that's just not what we spend our day doing. A lot of the times that we spend our day working on the organization, whereas those individuals are working in the organization. So we're trying to work on it, but it's really hard to be able to stay up with what changed in those things, and so that's that Fire Officer 2, there was probably, I think I had 5 or 6 people in there, and I had a few that most of them come back, and they had a lot of good things to say about you, Ian. So and I'll be honest, I'm the type that doesn't want to just send people to training just to have the training, right? I didn't know you taught that class. So once I seen you as an instructor, I was like, sign them up, like that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, it's a great class. I genuinely enjoy teaching it, and it sounds like a trite or cheesy thing to say, but I genuinely learn as much from everybody in those classes as I probably teach them. And that's the cool part about that course is that we get in there and day one we go around the room and we identify all the things that people need or want to talk about. This is your class. We have a curriculum we're going to work off of. We're going to make sure that we work through the actual book. But with that being said, let's tailor are talking points to the things that you need. And there's always mainstays, right? Coaching, mentorship, going from the back seat to the front seat. Like there's definitely mainstays in terms of what people need or crave and what they want to be better fire officers, whether they're already an officer and they feel like they're deficient in that area, or they're up and coming and they are looking at their organization and saying, hey, we don't do performance evaluations, or hey, we don't do after action reports, or hey, I would really like to learn how to use the PIA better. So we that's what we inject in that, or that course, so they can leave that class better situated to be a good officer than before when they came in.
Which that's good to hear, especially because I know I had some people in there and the things that you were talking about, because those are all things that our organization needs. I mean, I'm sure some of the feedback, at least for us internally, is just that, hey, we don't have this position, so we have really, what is our expectations? Like, what is the
Yeah,
expectation of me now as a lieutenant? Because I haven't been hard fast of putting something out to say this is exactly what the lieutenant's going to do. As it
yeah,
evolves, I want us to evolve together to be able to, collectively do it. Yes, we're going to make up a job description because that's what you got to do.
yeah,
But to involve, like, hey, what projects are company officer lieutenant level compared to
yeah,
where they should be escalated to a battalion chief, and as we go through, I think it scares a lot, but it also, because of the unknown,
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I try to explain, like, there's always going to be unknowns. And so as the unknowns, that's where, they're going to have to come up with some of those things, but collectively going to get, be able to build what does a lieutenant in our organization look like, which may not be the exact same as what somebody
Yeah.
else's organization is. So,
Well, and that's going to help with the buy-in as well. It's empowering them to say, you know what, this is what, and there's going to be things that you're going to have to step in and say, hey, this has to be part of the company officer, that may be left out, or there's going to be things that they want to throw in there that you're going to say, hey, like that's battalion chief level or that's firefighter level. But I think that in general, that really helps with that empowerment and buy-in once that position gets rolled out, because they had a hand in creating that. Which, like anything else, I love committees. The organization I'm at now, as well as Washington, really leveraged committees. And I think that when they're leveraged correctly, and there's a good diverse group that's in there that come from all different ranks and specialties, whether it's EMS or technical rescue, whatever it may be, I think that really helps with buy-in, because you have people that are providing input that is specific to where they're coming from within the organization, but then the output is very multi-dimensional, and it really touches a lot of people. So I think committee work is great, and I think that involving people in those decisions is extremely helpful for the buy-in on the back end.
yeah, I agree. I think that not only committees help in a couple ways. One, for buy-in for the organization, but also because we're usually blending multiple people that wouldn't normally work together or do
Yes,
something together.
absolutely.
So it, like, builds their relationship, and
Yeah,
because as they're working collectively towards one common goal, hey, maybe it's the turnout gear committee, or actually our hiring committee's been doing interviews over the last 3 days, and it builds their relationships together too. So I think that that's a really good thing. Um,
absolutely.
this segues me into this next question that I wanted to ask you is, so, because maybe being selfish, knowing that we're creating lieutenants in our organization, but as a deputy chief, what is your expectations of your company officers that are out there? And I know that now I'm not sure how many company officers you have underneath you. Well, obviously you have battalion chiefs probably, and then
Yeah.
they have the company officers, but say, what's your expectations of those officers on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I think we have somewhere in the range of 90 company officers, and then we have, 15-ish captains, and then 15 battalion chiefs and seven assistant chiefs. So, like it's a tiered system, just like any other, metro-sized organization. And, I'm coming into the organization after it's already been established in a lot of ways. But I'm trying to find ways to really understand what those company officers, so like in terms of the job description is the job description, and what their responsibilities are. I think it comes back to the expectations. And I've had those conversations with some of them. But, at Washington, I definitely had a much larger impact in that, coming from company officer to battalion chief to deputy chief. And, regardless of the organization on that, the expectation is that they're supportive of their members, that they understand what their members need. There's accountability there, and accountability, has a negative connotation sometimes, but in reality, like accountability is not positive nor negative. It's that we have a job to do, and we want to make sure that we're accountable to turning out quickly. We want to make sure that we're accountable to, being able to fulfill the job expectations, whether we're on the ambulance or we're on a fire engine or a truck or whatever it may be. So, ultimately, I like the company officers to have that ability to really focus on company cohesion and focusing on their crews, the training level. Like I'm a training every day type chief officer. Like I want to see people training, but I also want them taking care of them. Ultimately, we have some busy units. Again, we do roughly 200, 205 calls a day, about 100, 110 transports a day. So our rescues are extremely busy. We have some that are really, really busy, and we have others that aren't as busy, just like any organization. But for a rescue one, which is downtown Sarasota, which runs all day, all night, like the expectation is that they take care of their people, that they support them. If it's Saturday night and they know that they're going to be running all night long, making sure that they have rest throughout the day. Just really knowing what the individuals need to be the best at their job. I think one of the other things that I try to impress upon company officers, and this was as directly, lived experience for me, is that understanding and acknowledging that not everybody on your crew is going to need the exact same thing. So having the ability to kind of ebb and flow out of whether you want to call it leadership styles or whether you want to call it, like the ability to give them support, whatever, name you want to give it, the acknowledgement that person A may need somebody who is extremely direct communication, black and white, and person B may need somebody to hold their hand and pat it. Person C may need something entirely different. And there's going to be instances like on a fire ground where you're just going to give one thing, but when you're back at the firehouse and you have discretionary time, that you have the ability to ebb and flow out of what those individuals need to get the best out of them, right? So like people that feel supported, people that are happy to be at work are the people that give the best service to the community. So I want to make sure that they understand, like, I'm going to support them to support their people.
That's a great point because, I've never really heard anybody say it like that. So I really like that because you're right. We can treat everybody fairly, but we're not going to treat everybody the same because everybody gets treated to the ways that, is beneficial. And you as a company officer need to know your people to a point that, person A needs to be talked to direct. Hey, this is what, boom, 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 this is what it's going to be. And they're going to respond very well to that compared to person B. If you said that exact same thing in that exact same manner, they might turn around and cry.
Or leave.
Leave.
That's one of the things we dealt with at Washington is, and I'm not going to go down the generational side because honestly, it traverses all the generations at this point. But there were instances where people couldn't handle the direct communication from some officers, and we had some attrition because of that. And it was really, that's kind of where that was birthed out of, was making that acknowledgement. Like, you don't have to pander or placate to anybody. Like, accountability is accountability, treating them fair, being understanding. I'm not going to tolerate somebody, a company officer, screaming at somebody just because they did something wrong. But ultimately, like, we have to have the ability to communicate the appropriate way with individuals, and it's incumbent upon the company officer to kind of learn that about their individuals on their crew.
That's right. It's the delivery. There's a part to be firm, and this is going to be one way that we're going to do direct order, and that's when we like you said, you either have discretionary time or non-discretionary time.
Yeah.
And if I don't have any discretionary time, I'm standing in front of a house and we have a fire, or we're inside the house and we're doing a search or whatever we're doing. There's going to be one way that I'm going to be communicating with you. And then compared to back at the firehouse where there needs to be these other ways to be able to communicate with you, meaning like, and it's really, I would say you can say the same things. It's just the way that your tone comes off, the way that you deliver the message is how they're going to really take to it. And, and you're right though. It's very challenging for some people. Some people naturally have it, and they can do it, but then there's other people that just, that struggle with that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, you make a really good point about delivery, and I've had those conversations because it's not, and not necessarily here, but at Washington, ultimately there were times where people would lodge complaints or something of that nature, firefighters or somebody that was working for an officer, and when I would go back to have that conversation with the officer, that would be the point or the focus of the conversation is it's not about what you said. It's about how you said what you said. You could have said the exact same thing in a different way, and it would have been taken, and now it would have been a productive thing. But instead, you said it the way that you said it, and now it's no longer a productive thing. And now you and I are having to have this conversation, which is now taking up our time when we could be doing other things that are productive. So, really trying to press upon people. We're going to get stressed. We're going to get frustrated. We're all going to have bad days. We're going to have one-offs. But in general, we really need to be cognizant of the way that we're communicating with people, whether they're within the organization or they're within the public. We need to be cognizant of our body language, our facial tone, like all of those things, and making sure that we're just trying to communicate as compassionately as possible any given time that we can.
If people understand that you're having the conversation with them for their own good, then I think that's kind of what in my mind I think about it as is like, I've explained to them, like, I don't want to have this conversation, but I know the conversation's needed. And if they, and if they can understand that I'm having this uncomfortable conversation, or I started this uncomfortable conversation, even for me, more uncomfortable for me than it is for you, most likely, until we're done here, that we can both walk out of this room being, very refreshed or reset or whatever, feel better about it. But it all is within the times of, of how we deliver it. Meaning, like, if they are receiving it thinking that they just want to get me in trouble, or I just want to, they're just being this person that constantly complains and whatever else to me, and I can never do anything right or whatever, compared to the guy that says, hey, I'm knowing, or they actually know that you are telling them this because you want them to be better. And,
absolutely.
And I think that's just a big, I think a big advantage of, well, back to your point of the main part of creating relationships. If you create good relationships, being genuine, they know that when you sit them down and have a conversation, it's not because you want to, it's not because you want to embarrass them or anything. It's just that you want them to be better.
Well, and I always tell people, like, when we're done with this conversation, it's going to be up to you about how you feel about me. But when somebody does something wrong, ultimately, all I'm looking for is them to get better and not do it again, and grow, and have the organization grow because of it. So I'm frequently communicating that, like, I'm not upset with you as an individual. Ultimately, we're here and we're talking about this. But that goes back to that, I've tried to develop those relationships on the front end. That way, whenever we're done, we can stand up, we can shake hands. I'm sure nobody likes to get in trouble. Nobody likes to have constructive feedback, that type of thing. But at the same time, when they know that it's coming from the right place, they can walk away from that feeling as though, I don't have to like it. It may take me a day to get over it, but at the end of the day, I'm going to take this and I'm going to leverage this to get better.
Yeah, which is, and those are the individuals that you want to promote in your organization. The ones that how they respond is more important than how, everything else. It's just how they respond to some of those things. Just take that humbling, take a bite of that humbling pie, if you will, you know? And it doesn't taste good at times, and we've all been there, and it doesn't matter what rank you are, you still have that sometimes.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to anybody now that, hey, possibly looking at making a move like you did? You're going, they're real comfortable in their spot. They're happy where they're at, and now they're kind of faced with this challenge of, man, do I really want to be uncomfortable? And am I built to be uncomfortable for a period of time going to a new organization? What would be some of the advice you'd give somebody that?
Yeah, so I think that you have to look at the gravity of the change, right? So most people don't move 13 hours away to a different state and a different pension system where nobody else in their entire family lives, and they don't have any friends or anybody, like that was a fairly dramatic change, and it's paid off in spades. I mean, again, I love the organization. Every single person I've met in this organization has been welcoming, and that's really made this change so much easier for me to digest. But I will say that I think the biggest thing, whether you're talking about moving across town or moving across the country, is if you have a family, you need to get their support, and you need to make them understand it. And I 100% have my wife's support and my kids' support, but I don't think that I did as good of a job as I could have done. And it's just, not knowing what I didn't know. But I wish that I would have been able to make them more aware of what those changes would have looked like, because we didn't know a lot about the healthcare. We didn't know a lot about, like the resources. I have a daughter. My youngest is partially deaf. Cincinnati Children's, as everybody knows, most people know, is the number one children's hospital, in the country year over year for the most part. And their audiology is absolutely incredible. And then we had Dayton Children's in our backyard as well. We had all these resources, and when we moved down here, the resources just aren't as abundant. And we quickly realized this is how the other 90% of the country lives. Like, it's atypical to have the resources that we had. But those were the types of things I think that I could have probably done a little bit better preparing myself and my family for. So I would recommend really just understanding. I knew the organization that I was going into. I'd met a lot of really great people prior, like through the process. I knew that I was going to come down and be happy with the organization. But I would just really encourage people to understand the totality of the change. It's not just the job. I frequently tell people when they ask how the move is going that my job is the single easiest part about this move. I can be a firefighter anywhere. I could be, an officer anywhere, within reason, right? Like, but the job is the job. So I went from being a fire officer in one place. I come down here, it's different people, but ultimately it's still the fire service, and there's a lot of commonality there. So like, the fact that they've been so welcoming has made this, not only is it the easiest part just because it's fire service, but like because of the warm welcome that I've received. Like, it's just really, really been a fantastic move for me, but it has been much harder on my family because friend groups have changed or just vanished altogether. Healthcare, my wife stays at home, and she had a really strong stay-at-home moms group. So like all of those things. Good neighbors at our last neighborhood. So like those are the things that I would really, really impress upon people, is to understand the totality of the change, and understand that if you have a family, it's probably going to be a lot harder on them than it is you, right? So like we live like 15 minutes away from Siesta Key, which is like the number one beach in the entire United States. It's paradise. And we have a station 13 is on Siesta Key, and so like it's paradise in this area, and we live on vacation. We live where other people take vacation, but it's understanding that we're not on vacation, and life is life, and school and work and groceries and pharmacies and hospitals. And I was sharing with you right before I got on the call, my daughter got pushed off of a box by my son, and she split her lip. And there's a little bit of stress there, not necessarily just because she was injured, but because where do we go? We don't have Children's Hospital right down the street. We don't have Dayton Children's Hospital right down the street. So those are the things that I would really encourage people to understand, is just everything about the move. But beyond that, I would tell people, like, don't set your sights too low. And again, it might sound cheesy, that whole, you can do anything you want to do, you can do anything you put your mind to. But I really do tell people, like, look at somebody like myself. I started at a organization that had 17 people on duty a day, that did about 2,000 calls a year, high acuity calls, plenty of fires, but relatively slow in the grand scheme of things. Changes that they would ultimately be happy making and be successful in making, but they choose to be comfortable over being uncomfortable, which in no way, shape, or form is wrong, right? Like, you have to be happy. You have to make sure your family's happy. You have to be able to lay your head down at night and be confident that you made the right decision. But I think the individuals, and I've surrounded myself by really great mentors and friends, and a lot of them have moved all the way across the country for jobs. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's wrong. You just have to evaluate what's right for you. But I think the hallmark of all of those individuals that I was really able to take for myself is just that idea of just being okay, being uncomfortable, being okay not being in your comfort zone, and understanding that we grow when we are uncomfortable. And that's something that I think that if you decide you want to go to a different organization, you can make that happen. Right, with enough work, with enough networking, with enough preparation, whether that's interview preparation or just getting formal education, on the job training, whatever that may be, with enough preparation, you can make whatever change you want to make. You just have to be okay with the discomfort that comes along with that.
But you did make a good point. It's not about just being uncomfortable in a new job. It's about the uncomfortable of life. Especially in your case, where you're moving to a whole nother town, you're moving to, all the things that you just identified, is that, it's a good way of putting it, the totality of the move,
Yeah.
And all the impacts of it, because, we didn't realize my in-laws don't live too far from you. They live in the Villages. And
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so not too far, and very familiar with your area. Love your area.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law is actually a firefighter paramedic for Marion County.
Okay.
So not too far from you as well. But did you ever wonder? Did you ever wonder why that size of organization was looking for, say, a shift commander and having all those company officers and all those battalion chiefs of why there wasn't internal promotion and did you ever wonder why they were going to the outside or?
Yeah, so I mean, I had the same question with Washington, right? It's very atypical to have a company officer come in from the outside, and I think that, you know, eh, there's a lot of factors in terms of why individuals, and we dealt with this whenever we would open up battalion chief processes at Washington or company officer processes, and we had 40 or 50 people that were available for them, and we only had 7 applications. I think there's a mixture of just people, the jobs that they're in being really attractive, whether that's because of the schedule or that's because they're happy with the pay that they're at or their ability to trade or they're happy with their seniority. So you have some of those inherent things where like people are just happy with where they're at, which is fantastic. I think with both Washington and Sarasota, I think it was just really one of those things that in terms of the succession planning, it wasn't fleshed out in both organizations. Washington definitely has that now. The succession planning is fantastic, and I know coming in Sarasota, my first week here, we were going through the accreditation process through CPSC or CFAI. That week, we had our site visit, and we ended up being recommended for accreditation. We got our accreditation at the Excellence Conference in February, March. So part of that is succession planning and strategic planning, and there's a huge emphasis that's been placed on developing people and making sure people not only have the skills, because I mean, the battalion chiefs, I came in as an assistant chief. There's 15 battalion chiefs. Every single one of them could have done that job and done it very well. And ultimately, I think just a lot of people are really happy being battalion chiefs. And there's some of the best battalion chiefs I've ever worked with in terms of just being able to traverse really difficult, complex situations all the way to running high-rise fires. They do a fantastic job, but I think that they really enjoy what they do. There were several internal candidates through that process, and I was fortunate to position myself well enough to get that job. But ultimately, I think there's several people within the organization that could do the job just as well, if not better than I was able to do the job. Same thing with Washington. There were several really fantastic candidates that were firefighters. I was fortunate to get the lieutenant's position, but ultimately, had I not gotten it, I don't know that they could have gone wrong. They had 3 or 4 other good candidates that they could have grabbed. So like I said, whether it's being blessed or good luck or whatever, however you want to put it, like I've been really fortunate to have those opportunities. And I think it just goes back to being genuine when I go into my interviews and just really like expressing like I do my homework. And when I came down to Sarasota, like I knew that I wanted to be here. And if I didn't get the opportunity, that would have been fine. Ultimately they would have chosen the right person for the organization. Or on the flip side, if I got the opportunity, I knew that I really wanted to be here. And again, I was fortunate to get the opportunity.
Yeah, well, and when you talk about being genuine in your interviews and just the way you conduct yourself, I think you are the type of person that when talking to, like, you just grab that audience, like, you're engaged. Like, I don't have to remind myself 100 times to, to listen, to respond, type of thing. So, I can see how easily that you were a fantastic fit for that organization. And that's pretty awesome because it's a big organization. I mean,
Yeah.
and I thought the picture that you have now on LinkedIn was pretty cool. I mean, you're out in the middle of the ocean, like,
That was my, I think, first or second week, and we went out and we went on the Marine One, our fireboat, and we were going around, and there was a pod of dolphins that was kind of following the boat, and I took a video of that, and I'm thinking the week before that I almost hit a goose in the snow in Washington County. Like
yeah.
I went from being in Dayton where it was cold and dreary to I'm now in the Gulf on a fireboat with
Yeah.
a pod of dolphins. So it was really like a pinch me moment, and I held off on showing my wife the pictures and videos for a little bit because I didn't want to send her like, hey, look what I'm doing at work today.
Yeah, while
She was
she's at home too.
my kid's fighting with her. So, I'm out on the fireboat in the Gulf. But yeah, it's been honestly just a really surreal thing, and like I said, like they didn't have to embrace me, right? I'm from the outside. This is a huge organization that does a really good job, that has really fantastic firefighter paramedics and lieutenants and captains, battalion chiefs, all the way up to the fire chief. And they didn't have to embrace me the way that they have. And I just, like I said, I couldn't be any more blessed to have just come in and just really be given the benefit of the doubt. That doesn't mean I'm not having to prove myself. That doesn't mean that I'm not having to build that credibility, but people have just been really respectful, and it's been a really great um, uh, time for me to come in and just have that opportunity to get to know a whole lot more people. And like I said, it's right up my alley. Like I've always enjoyed just getting to know people and building those relationships. And now I have like 550 people to do that with, which is fantastic.
Well, yeah, that is pretty awesome. But you know what? We've been talking for an hour and a half essentially. So, let's, we'll wrap it up. I will say that it's been great, just getting to know you a little bit more, hearing a lot of, I think that anybody aspiring to be a company officer, anybody aspiring to maybe make a change in a job or a different organization, or they're staring down the fact of being uncomfortable during the, upcoming promotion or whatever else. So I think they have a lot of takeaways from the advice that you have. And when I come down to see my in-laws, and I'm going to look you up so I can, check out a couple of your firehouses. I would love that.
Absolutely.
But hey, I really appreciate you taking the time out tonight, and being a part of the Triple P podcast, Ian. I think you have a lot of valuable information, a lot of people will take away from it. So definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. If you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you feel so inclined, please help us spread the word by telling your fire and EMS friends about this channel.